In the dim halls of the Palazzo Vecchio, where shadows danced with the flickering candlelight of ambition, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a truth that would echo through centuries: the greatest fortress a man can build is not of stone and mortar, but of silence and self-mastery. It was here, amid the political machinations of Renaissance Florence, that he witnessed how approval-seeking destroyed princes faster than any enemy's sword, and how those who defended themselves constantly were already defeated. The year was 1512, and Machiavelli had just watched the Medici family reclaim their power through methods that defied conventional wisdom. They did not plead their case to every merchant in the market square, nor did they justify their actions to critics who whispered in cathedral corners. They simply acted, with the terrible certainty of those who had destroyed every weakness within themselves. This observation would form the cornerstone of understanding that separates those who rule from those who are ruled, those who command respect from those who beg for it. The first lesson emerges from the rubble of collapsed kingdoms and failed leaders: the man who chases approval has already surrendered his sovereignty. In the courts of Europe, Machiavelli witnessed countless nobles who reduced themselves to performing seals, entertaining every critic and appeasing every voice that questioned their authority. These men, despite their titles and wealth, possessed no real power. They had become slaves to the opinions of others, their every decision filtered through the imagined judgment of their subjects, their peers, their enemies. Consider the Duke of Milan, who once ruled with the confidence befitting his station. Yet as whispers of discontent reached his ears, he began a desperate campaign to win hearts and minds. He lowered taxes to court popularity, held public audiences to address every grievance, and sent emissaries to explain his policies to neighboring courts. With each concession, each explanation, each plea for understanding, his authority diminished. The people sensed his desperation like wolves scenting wounded prey. Within 2 years, his own advisors had orchestrated his downfall, knowing that a man who needed their approval could never truly command their respect. This principle transcends the political realm and extends into every interaction between human beings. The businessman who explains his decisions to subordinates seeking to understand his reasoning soon finds those same subordinates questioning his judgment. The father who justifies his rules to his children discovers that rules become negotiable the moment they require justification. The lover who seeks constant validation from his partner creates the very dynamic that destroys attraction and respect. The psychology underlying this phenomenon runs deeper than mere social dynamics. When a man seeks approval, he communicates something fundamental about his relationship with reality itself. He reveals that his sense of worth, his confidence in his decisions, his very identity depends upon external validation. This dependence creates a form of spiritual poverty that others instinctively recognize and, whether consciously or unconsciously, exploit. In the merchant republics of northern Italy, Machiavelli observed how the most successful traders operated with a different principle entirely. They made their offers once, stated their terms clearly, and waited. They did not chase after reluctant buyers with increasingly desperate propositions. They did not explain why their goods were valuable to those who failed to see their worth immediately. Their confidence in their products was absolute, and this confidence became part of the value they offered. Customers sensed this certainty and were drawn to it, understanding instinctively that something valuable did not need to beg for recognition. The second cornerstone of this philosophy emerges equally stark: the man who defends himself has already lost the battle. Defense implies guilt, weakness, or uncertainty. It places the defender in a subordinate position to his accuser, accepting the premise that he owes an explanation for his existence, his choices, or his actions. This acceptance of subordination creates a psychological framework that extends far beyond the immediate conflict. During his diplomatic missions to France, Machiavelli witnessed King Louis XII's response to criticisms from the Papal States. Rather than defending his policies, the king simply continued implementing them. When Pope Julius II accused him of overstepping papal authority, Louis did not convene councils to justify his position or send envoys to explain his reasoning. He recognized that defense would legitimize the Pope's authority to judge his actions. Instead, he responded with silence and continued action, forcing his critics to either escalate their opposition to open conflict or accept his position as established fact. This principle operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface level, defense consumes valuable time and energy that could be directed toward productive action. Every moment spent explaining oneself is a moment not spent advancing one's position. More subtly, the act of defense reshapes the psychological landscape of any interaction. It transforms the defender from an actor into a reactor, from someone who shapes events into someone who responds to them. The deeper truth lies in how defense affects the defender's own psychology. When a man regularly explains and justifies his actions, he begins to internalize doubt about those actions. The external pressure to defend creates internal uncertainty. He starts questioning decisions that were previously clear, second-guessing judgments that were once confident. This erosion of inner certainty becomes visible to others, who respond by increasing their challenges and criticisms, creating a destructive cycle that can reduce even strong men to nervous, reactive shadows of themselves. In the trading houses of Venice, successful merchants understood this principle intuitively. When competitors questioned their methods or critics attacked their practices, they responded with results rather than explanations. If a rival claimed their prices were too high, they did not argue about costs or justify their margins. They simply continued selling to customers who valued their goods. If political figures criticized their international dealings, they did not publish pamphlets defending their patriotism. They allowed their contributions to the city's prosperity to speak for themselves. This approach required a fundamental shift in perspective about conflict itself. Rather than viewing criticism as a problem to be solved through explanation, these merchants treated it as information about the critic. Someone who demanded justification for successful practices revealed their own position of weakness. Someone who attacked prosperity revealed their own lack of it. The criticism became a diagnostic tool rather than a threat, providing insight into the psychology and position of the critic rather than creating pressure for the criticized. The third element of this philosophy, perhaps the most profound, addresses the transformation of the self. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. This destruction is not a one-time event but a continuous process of identifying and eliminating every aspect of character that seeks external validation, that requires defense, that depends upon the approval of others for its existence. Machiavelli understood that every man carries within himself two distinct natures, the weak self that needs constant reassurance and the strong self that operates from inner certainty. The weak self manifests in countless ways: the need to be liked, the compulsion to explain decisions, the fear of disapproval, the desire to be understood, the requirement for validation, the tendency to seek consensus before acting. This weak self is not evil or unnatural, but it is fundamentally incompatible with the exercise of real power or the achievement of significant goals. The strong self operates from entirely different principles. It makes decisions based on internal logic rather than external pressure. It acts from conviction rather than consensus. It measures success by results rather than approval. It finds satisfaction in achievement rather than recognition. Most importantly, it exists independent of others' opinions, drawing its strength from sources that cannot be touched by criticism, manipulation, or social pressure. The destruction of the weak self requires brutal honesty about one's own motivations. Every decision must be examined for traces of approval seeking. Every emotional response must be analyzed for signs of dependence on others' validation. Every reaction to criticism must be scrutinized for defensive reflexes. This internal audit reveals the extent to which the weak self has infected even seemingly confident actions. Consider the merchant prince Lorenzo de' Medici, whose transformation Machiavelli studied closely. In his youth, Lorenzo sought approval from Florentine society through elaborate public festivals, generous patronage designed to win popular affection, and careful cultivation of relationships with every significant family in the city. Despite his wealth and position, he remained anxious about his reputation, sensitive to criticism, and dependent upon public opinion for his sense of security. The transformation began when Lorenzo recognized that this approval-seeking had made him vulnerable to manipulation. Political rivals could influence his decisions by threatening his reputation. Business partners could extract concessions by suggesting his practices were unpopular. Even servants could pressure him by implying his commands might damage his standing. He had created a system where everyone except himself had some degree of control over his choices. The process of destroying this weak self required Lorenzo to systematically eliminate every decision-making criterion except results. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" he trained himself to ask, "What will this accomplish?" Instead of considering, "How will this affect my reputation?" he focused on, "How will this advance my position?" Instead of worrying, "Will this be popular?" he concentrated on, "Will this be effective?" This reorientation created immediate internal conflict. The weak self protested against decisions that might provoke criticism. It generated anxiety about actions that could be misunderstood. It created elaborate rationalizations for avoiding unpopular but necessary choices. Lorenzo learned to recognize these protests as signals that he was moving in the right direction, indicators that he was breaking free from the prison of others' opinions. The external manifestation of this internal change appeared gradually but unmistakably. Lorenzo stopped explaining his business decisions to competitors who questioned them. He ceased defending his political positions to those who disagreed. He ended his practice of seeking consensus before implementing new policies. Most dramatically, he began making decisions that he knew would be unpopular but which served his long-term interests. The response from Florentine society revealed the true nature of approval-seeking dynamics. Those who had previously offered suggestions and criticism with the expectation of influencing Lorenzo's behavior found themselves ignored. Some escalated their pressure, assuming he had simply failed to understand their concerns. Others attempted to manipulate him through third parties, thinking indirect pressure might succeed where direct pressure had failed. A few resorted to threats, hoping fear might restore their influence where approval-seeking had existed. Lorenzo's response to these escalating pressures demonstrated the power of the transformed self. He neither defended himself against accusations nor sought to win back approval through concessions. He simply continued acting according to his own judgment, allowing results to validate or condemn his choices. This consistency in the face of pressure gradually wore down his critics' expectation that they could influence his behavior through their opinions. The most significant change occurred in how others perceived and related to Lorenzo. The merchants who had previously felt entitled to question his business practices began treating his decisions as established facts to work around rather than opinions to debate. The political figures who had expected him to justify his positions started accepting them as givens rather than proposals subject to their approval. Even family members and close associates shifted from offering unsolicited advice to seeking his judgment on their own decisions. This transformation in relationships revealed a fundamental truth about human psychology: people respect and are drawn to those who operate independently of their approval, while they unconsciously seek to control and manipulate those who depend upon their validation. The man who needs others' approval grants them power over him, while the man who operates independently of such approval inspires others to seek his. The practical applications of this principle extend into every domain of human activity. In business, the entrepreneur who seeks investor approval for every decision creates a dynamic where investors feel entitled to micromanage his operations. The executive who defends his strategies to skeptical board members establishes a pattern where his authority becomes perpetually questionable. The salesman who chases reluctant customers with increasingly desperate presentations destroys his own credibility and market position. In personal relationships, the dynamic operates with equal force. The man who seeks constant validation from his partner creates a relationship where his worth becomes contingent upon her moods and opinions. The father who explains his decisions to his children establishes their right to judge and question his authority. The friend who defends himself against every criticism transforms friendship into a courtroom where he stands perpetually accused. The professional realm offers countless examples of how this principle determines career trajectories. The employee who seeks approval from every colleague before proposing new ideas ensures those ideas will be filtered through others' limitations and biases. The manager who defends his decisions to subordinates undermines the authority necessary for effective leadership. The consultant who explains his recommendations to clients who question his expertise positions himself as a vendor rather than an advisor. Yet the destruction of the weak self extends beyond changing external behaviors. It requires a fundamental reorientation of internal identity and self-worth. The weak self derives its sense of value from others' recognition, approval, and validation. It experiences criticism as a threat to its existence and seeks to neutralize that threat through explanation and defense. It measures success through others' reactions rather than objective results. the strong self operates from an entirely different foundation. Its sense of worth comes from internal standards and objective achievements rather than social recognition. It views criticism as information about the critic rather than a judgment requiring response. It measures success through results and progress toward goals rather than through others' approval or disapproval. This transformation requires developing new sources of confidence and satisfaction. Where the weak self seeks external validation, the strong self must learn to derive satisfaction from the quality of decisions made under pressure, the consistency of actions with principles, the achievement of difficult goals regardless of recognition, and the development of capabilities regardless of others' acknowledgement. The process involves training attention away from others' reactions and toward objective measures of progress and achievement. Instead of monitoring whether decisions are popular, the transformed self monitors whether they are effective. Instead of measuring social approval, it measures actual results. Instead of seeking validation, it seeks improvement and growth. This internal reorientation creates a form of psychological independence that others find both attractive and intimidating. People are drawn to those who operate from their own center, who make decisions based on their own judgment, who pursue their own goals with confidence and consistency. Yet this same independence can provoke hostility from those who are accustomed to influencing others through approval and disapproval. The truly transformed individual learns to navigate this dynamic without returning to approval-seeking behaviors. When others attempt to manipulate through criticism, he responds with indifference rather than defense. When they offer approval to influence his actions, he receives it without changing course. When they escalate pressure to restore their influence, he maintains his independence without explaining or justifying his position. This consistency gradually trains others to relate to him differently. Those who cannot accept his independence typically remove themselves from his life, while those who respect strength and independence find themselves more attracted to his presence. The relationships that survive this transformation tend to be healthier and more genuine, based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and control. The political implications of this philosophy extend far beyond individual transformation. Societies themselves can be understood as operating from either strength or weakness, either internal principles or external validation. A nation that seeks constant approval from international opinion becomes subject to manipulation by those whose approval it seeks. A government that defends every policy to critics establishes the principle that critics have legitimate authority to judge governmental decisions. Machiavelli observed that the most stable and powerful states operated independently of others' approval while remaining pragmatically aware of others' capabilities and interests. They made decisions based on their own analysis of their situation and goals rather than on what would be popular with international opinion. They responded to criticism with action rather than explanation, allowing results to speak for their policies rather than engaging in constant justification. This approach to statecraft required leaders who had themselves undergone the transformation from weak to strong self. A prince who needed approval from his subjects could not make unpopular but necessary decisions. A ruler who defended every policy to critics could not maintain the authority necessary for effective governance. A leader who sought validation from other nations could not pursue his own country's interests when they conflicted with international opinion. The economic applications of this principle reveal themselves in market dynamics and business relationships. Companies that seek customer approval for every product decision create products designed by committee, lacking the bold vision necessary for market leadership. Entrepreneurs who defend their business models to skeptical investors establish a dynamic where investors feel entitled to manage their companies. Salespeople who chase reluctant customers with increasingly desperate presentations position themselves as supplicants rather than providers of value. The most successful businesses operate with the confidence that their value proposition is clear to those who need their products or services. They state their terms clearly and allow customers to decide whether those terms meet their needs. They do not chase after reluctant buyers with explanations and concessions. They do not defend their pricing to those who question it. They simply continue serving those who recognize and are willing to pay for the value they provide. This business philosophy requires entrepreneurs and business leaders to undergo the same personal transformation from approval-seeking to result-oriented behavior. The business owner who needs customers to like him personally rather than value his products creates a dynamic where business relationships become dependent upon his personality rather than his company's capabilities. The executive who seeks employee approval for management decisions undermines the authority necessary for effective leadership. The transformation applies equally to intellectual and creative endeavors. The writer who seeks approval from critics before publishing his work ensures that work will be filtered through others' limitations and preferences. The artist who defends his vision to those who fail to understand it positions himself as needing their validation rather than offering something of value. The researcher who explains his methodology to every skeptic wastes time that could be spent on actual research. Creative individuals who have undergone this transformation operate with the confidence that their work has value independent of immediate recognition or understanding. They produce according to their own vision and standards rather than according to others' expectations. They allow their work to find its audience rather than seeking approval from those who may not be their intended audience. This approach to creative work requires developing internal standards of excellence that do not depend upon external validation. The transformed creator measures success through the quality of the work itself, the consistency of the work with his vision, the development of his capabilities, and the achievement of his creative goals, rather than through critics' reviews or popular reception. The social and relationship implications of this philosophy challenge many conventional approaches to human interaction. Traditional social wisdom suggests that seeking others' approval and defending oneself against criticism are normal and healthy behaviors. The Machiavellian perspective reveals these behaviors as forms of voluntary subordination that create dysfunctional power dynamics in relationships. In romantic relationships, the man who seeks constant validation from his partner creates a dynamic where she becomes responsible for his self-worth. This responsibility becomes burdensome and ultimately destroys the attraction and respect necessary for a healthy relationship. The partner finds herself with unwanted power over his emotional state and gradually loses respect for someone who has made his worth dependent upon her approval. The transformed individual brings a fundamentally different dynamic to relationships. His sense of worth and identity remains independent of his partner's moods, opinions, or approval. This independence allows her to be herself without feeling responsible for managing his emotional state. It also creates the kind of strength and stability that tends to be attractive and reassuring in long-term relationships. Family relationships operate according to similar principles. The parent who seeks his children's approval for parental decisions undermines the authority necessary for effective parenting. Children need parents who operate from clear principles and consistent standards rather than from a desire to be liked. The approval-seeking parent creates insecurity in children who sense that the adult responsible for their guidance is uncertain about his own authority. Friendship relationships also benefit from this transformation. Friends who operate independently of each other's approval create space for genuine intimacy and mutual respect. They can disagree without threatening the relationship because neither depends upon the other's validation for self-worth. They can be honest without fear of losing approval because they do not need that approval for their sense of identity. The spiritual and philosophical dimensions of this transformation touch upon fundamental questions of human nature and purpose. Many religious and philosophical traditions have recognized that dependence upon others' approval creates a form of spiritual slavery that prevents authentic living and genuine fulfillment. The man who lives according to others' expectations rather than his own principles never discovers his true capabilities or fulfills his unique potential. The transformation from weak to strong self represents a form of spiritual liberation that allows authentic expression of individual nature and capabilities. Free from the need to conform to others' expectations or gain their approval, the transformed individual can pursue goals and express qualities that reflect his genuine nature rather than his social persona. This liberation creates the possibility for what Machiavelli understood as true virtue, the expression of individual excellence in service of meaningful goals. When a man no longer needs others' permission to be himself, he can develop and express capabilities that might not conform to social expectations but which serve his genuine purposes and contribute to his authentic achievements. The philosophical implications extend to questions of truth and knowledge. The man who seeks approval for his ideas ensures those ideas will be filtered through others' understanding and limitations. He cannot pursue truth that might be unpopular or investigate questions that might lead to uncomfortable answers. His thinking becomes constrained by what others are willing to validate rather than by what evidence and reasoning reveal. The intellectually transformed individual pursues truth independent of whether the truth is socially acceptable or personally comfortable. He investigates questions according to their importance rather than their popularity. He reaches conclusions based on evidence and reasoning rather than on what others are willing to approve. This intellectual independence enables genuine discovery and understanding rather than mere confirmation of existing beliefs. The transformation also affects one's relationship with failure and success. The approval-seeking individual experiences failure as a judgment upon his worth rather than as information about what approaches work and what approaches need modification. He becomes risk-averse because failure might damage his reputation and reduce others' approval. Success becomes dependent upon recognition rather than achievement, creating a fragile foundation for self-confidence. The transformed individual relates to failure as valuable feedback about the effectiveness of his approaches rather than as a judgment upon his worth. This perspective enables him to take greater risks in pursuit of meaningful goals because failure does not threaten his identity. Success becomes measured by actual achievement and progress rather than by recognition, creating a solid foundation for continued growth and development. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this transformation involves the development of what might be called authentic authority. This authority does not depend upon position, title, or others' recognition. It emerges naturally from the consistency between principles and actions, the quality of decisions made under pressure, and the achievement of difficult goals despite obstacles and criticism. Authentic authority attracts others who recognize and respect genuine strength and capability. It repels those who seek to manipulate through approval and disapproval because such manipulation tactics prove ineffective against someone who operates independently of external validation. The relationships and associations that form around authentic authority tend to be based on mutual respect and shared values rather than manipulation and control. This authority enables the transformed individual to influence others through example rather than through seeking their approval or defending his positions. Others observe his consistency, his effectiveness, and his independence, and many find themselves inspired to develop similar qualities. His influence spreads not through his attempts to convince others but through their recognition of the value of his approach to living and working. The practical development of this transformation requires specific strategies and practices. Regular examination of motivations reveals the extent to which decisions are influenced by approval seeking rather than by rational analysis of what will be most effective. This examination must be honest and thorough because the weak self is skilled at disguising approval seeking as principled action. Training attention away from others' reactions and toward objective results develops the habit of measuring success through achievement rather than recognition. This requires consciously ignoring social feedback while monitoring actual progress toward goals. It means celebrating private victories that others may not notice while remaining indifferent to public praise for minor accomplishments. Developing internal standards of excellence provides alternative sources of satisfaction and confidence. These standards must be based on objective measures of quality, effectiveness, and progress rather than on social comparisons or external validation. The transformed individual learns to derive deep satisfaction from meeting his own standards even when others fail to recognize or appreciate his achievements. Practice in making decisions without seeking consensus or approval builds the capability for independent action. This starts with small decisions where the social pressure is minimal and gradually extends to larger decisions where the pressure for approval seeking is stronger. Each decision made independently of others' approval strengthens the capacity for authentic self-direction. The cultivation of indifference to criticism requires understanding criticism as information about the critic rather than as judgment requiring response. Most criticism reveals the critic's own limitations, fears, or competitive position rather than providing valuable feedback about the criticized action or decision. Learning to extract any useful information while ignoring the emotional pressure of criticism enables continued effective action despite social pressure. Developing satisfaction from process rather than recognition changes the emotional foundation of achievement. Instead of seeking the pleasure of others' approval, the transformed individual learns to find satisfaction in the quality of his thinking, the consistency of his actions with his principles, the effectiveness of his strategies, and the development of his capabilities. This internal source of satisfaction proves more reliable and sustainable than external validation. The financial and career implications of this transformation often surprise those who believe that success requires constant attention to others' opinions and approval. In reality, the opposite proves true. Those who operate independently of approval-seeking pressures make decisions based on effectiveness rather than popularity, pursue opportunities based on potential rather than consensus, and develop capabilities based on results rather than recognition. In professional contexts, this independence enables individuals to propose innovative solutions without requiring prior approval from colleagues, to pursue challenging projects without needing consensus about their value, and to develop expertise in areas that may not be immediately popular but which serve long-term career goals. The professional who operates this way often finds himself ahead of trends rather than following them, because he is willing to pursue directions that others consider too risky or unpopular. Entrepreneurially, this transformation proves especially valuable. Starting and building businesses requires countless decisions that will be criticized by those who prefer conventional approaches. The entrepreneur who needs approval for his business model, his marketing strategy, his product decisions, or his operational choices will find himself paralyzed by conflicting opinions and unable to move forward with the speed and decisiveness that entrepreneurial success requires. The transformed entrepreneur makes decisions based on his analysis of market opportunities, customer needs, and operational effectiveness rather than on what investors, competitors, or industry experts consider appropriate. He pursues opportunities that others may consider too unusual or risky because he is not constrained by others' comfort levels or approval. His willingness to act independently often enables him to identify and capture opportunities that others miss because they are waiting for consensus or approval. Investment and financial decisions also benefit from this independence. The investor who seeks approval for his investment strategy from others who may not share his goals, risk tolerance, or time horizon will find his portfolio managed by committee rather than by clear principles. The transformed individual makes investment decisions based on his own analysis and goals rather than on what others consider appropriate or safe. This independence proves especially valuable during market volatility when popular opinion often drives investors toward emotional decisions that serve long-term goals poorly. The individual who operates independently of social pressure can maintain consistent investment strategies based on his principles rather than reacting to others' fears and enthusiasms. The health and lifestyle applications of this philosophy address the tendency to make personal choices based on social expectations rather than individual needs and goals. Many people choose careers, relationships, living situations, and lifestyle patterns based on what others expect or approve rather than on what serves their authentic goals and needs. The transformed individual makes lifestyle choices based on their effectiveness in supporting his goals and well-being rather than on their social acceptability. He may choose unconventional approaches to health, relationships, work, or personal development if his analysis suggests these approaches will be more effective for his situation than conventional alternatives. This independence enables experimentation with approaches that others may consider unusual but which may prove more effective for his particular circumstances. It also provides protection against social pressure to adopt lifestyle patterns that may be popular but which do not serve his individual needs and goals. The educational and intellectual development implications suggest approaching learning and skill development based on effectiveness rather than approval. Many people choose what to study, which skills to develop, and how to spend their intellectual energy based on what others consider impressive or appropriate rather than on what will most effectively serve their goals. The transformed individual pursues learning and development opportunities based on their potential to enhance his capabilities and effectiveness rather than on their social prestige or others' approval. He may choose to develop skills that others consider unimportant if his analysis suggests these skills will provide significant advantages for his particular goals and circumstances. This independence enables him to develop unique combinations of capabilities that may not fit conventional categories but which provide distinctive advantages in pursuing his chosen directions. It also protects him from wasting time and energy on learning that serves social signaling purposes rather than actual capability development. The creative and artistic applications reveal how approval-seeking constrains authentic expression and innovative work. Many potential creators never develop their capabilities because they seek approval for their artistic vision before developing the skills necessary to express that vision effectively. Others compromise their authentic expression to conform to popular styles or critical expectations. The transformed creative individual develops and expresses his artistic vision independent of others' approval while remaining aware of technical standards and market realities. He pursues creative directions that reflect his authentic interests and capabilities rather than conforming to others' expectations about what he should create or how he should express himself. This independence enables creative risk-taking that often proves necessary for innovative work. It also provides the persistence necessary to develop distinctive capabilities and expression rather than settling for conventional approaches that gain easy approval but lack authentic personal expression. The community and social engagement aspects of this transformation address how to participate in community life and social relationships without falling back into approval-seeking patterns. The challenge lies in remaining engaged and contributing to community well-being while maintaining independence from community approval as a source of identity and self-worth. The transformed individual participates in community life based on his values and goals rather than on seeking social approval or avoiding social criticism. He contributes to community well-being because such contribution aligns with his principles rather than because such contribution will enhance his reputation or social standing. This approach enables genuine service and contribution rather than performance designed to gain approval. It also provides protection against community pressure to support causes or positions that conflict with his analysis and principles. His community involvement becomes an expression of his values rather than a strategy for gaining social acceptance. The leadership implications of this transformation reveal why approval-seeking individuals struggle to provide effective leadership even when placed in leadership positions. Leadership requires making decisions that serve long-term goals even when these decisions are unpopular in the short term. It requires maintaining consistent standards even when applying these standards creates conflict. It requires pursuing organizational effectiveness even when effectiveness requires challenging comfortable assumptions and established practices. The transformed leader makes decisions based on their likely effectiveness in achieving organizational goals rather than on their popularity with team members, stakeholders, or external observers. He maintains consistent standards and expectations even when doing so creates temporary conflict or discomfort. He pursues organizational improvement even when improvement requires changes that some people prefer to avoid. This approach to leadership often proves more effective than approval-seeking leadership styles because it provides the clarity and consistency that effective organizations require. Team members may not always like the decisions, but they understand the principles behind them and can predict how future decisions will be made. This predictability enables better planning and more effective coordination than leadership styles that vary based on social pressure and approval-seeking. The negotiation and conflict resolution applications demonstrate how approval-seeking undermines effectiveness in competitive and adversarial situations. The negotiator who needs approval from the other party will make unnecessary concessions to maintain a pleasant atmosphere. The individual who defends himself against every criticism in a conflict situation allows others to control the agenda and direction of the discussion. The transformed individual approaches negotiation based on clear goals and acceptable terms rather than on maintaining others' approval. He states his position clearly and allows others to decide whether they can work within those parameters rather than modifying his position to gain their approval. This approach often proves more effective because it provides clarity about what agreements are possible and prevents the confusion that arises when positions constantly shift in response to social pressure. In conflict situations, he focuses on achieving resolution that serves his goals rather than on defending himself against criticism or gaining others' approval for his perspective. This focus enables more effective problem solving because energy goes toward finding solutions rather than toward managing social dynamics and emotional reactions. The mentoring and teaching implications address how to help others develop capabilities without falling into approval-seeking relationships where the mentor needs validation from students rather than focusing on their development. Many potential mentors compromise the effectiveness of their teaching because they seek approval from students rather than challenging them to develop genuine capabilities. The transformed mentor provides instruction and feedback based on what will most effectively develop students' capabilities rather than on what will maintain students' approval and comfort. He maintains standards that serve students' long-term development even when these standards create short-term discomfort or resistance. His satisfaction comes from students' actual development rather than from their approval of his teaching methods. This approach often proves more effective because it focuses on actual skill development rather than on maintaining comfortable social relationships. Students may not always enjoy the process, but they develop genuine capabilities rather than just feeling good about their progress. As this exploration of Machiavellian principles reaches its conclusion, the fundamental truth emerges with stark clarity: the man who destroys his weak self, that aspect of his nature that requires external validation, that defends against criticism, that seeks approval from others, creates within himself a fortress that no external force can breach. This destruction is not a violent act but a careful, systematic elimination of dependencies that make one vulnerable to manipulation, control, and defeat. The weak self operates like a series of invisible chains that connect a man's peace of mind, his decision-making process, and his sense of worth to the opinions and reactions of others. Every chain represents a point of vulnerability where others can apply pressure to influence his behavior. The man who seeks approval has given others the key to his emotional state. The man who defends himself against every criticism has accepted others' authority to judge his actions. The man who needs validation from his environment has made his confidence dependent upon factors beyond his control. Breaking these chains requires more than intellectual understanding; it demands a fundamental reorientation of how one relates to oneself and to others. The process begins with honest recognition of how extensively approval seeking has infected one's decision-making. Most people are surprised to discover how many of their choices, from career decisions to daily activities, are influenced by imagined social judgment rather than by clear analysis of what will most effectively serve their goals. The transformation continues with systematic practice in making decisions independent of others' expected reactions. This practice starts with low-stakes situations where the social pressure is minimal and gradually extends to more significant decisions where the pressure for approval seeking is stronger. Each decision made independently of social pressure strengthens the capacity for authentic self-direction and weakens the habit of seeking external validation. The development of internal standards of excellence provides alternative sources of satisfaction and confidence. These standards must be based on objective measures of quality, effectiveness, and progress rather than on social comparisons or external recognition. The individual learns to derive genuine satisfaction from meeting his own standards even when others fail to notice or appreciate his achievements. Training attention away from others' reactions and toward objective results develops the habit of measuring success through actual achievement rather than through recognition. This requires consciously ignoring much social feedback while carefully monitoring progress toward meaningful goals. It means celebrating private victories that others may not notice while remaining indifferent to public praise for minor accomplishments. Perhaps most importantly, the transformation requires developing what might be called authentic authority, the kind of influence that emerges naturally from consistency between principles and actions, from the quality of decisions made under pressure, and from the achievement of difficult goals despite obstacles and criticism. This authority does not depend upon position, title, or others' recognition. It cannot be granted by external sources and, therefore, cannot be taken away by them. The man who completes this transformation discovers that he has become essentially indestructible in the ways that matter most. Others may criticize his decisions, but their criticism cannot touch his confidence because his confidence comes from his own standards rather than from their approval. They may attempt to manipulate him through social pressure, but such pressure proves ineffective because he no longer needs their validation for his sense of worth. They may try to defeat him through opposition, but their opposition cannot break his will because his will is not dependent upon their cooperation. This indestructibility is not the result of becoming hard or callous toward others. Rather, it emerges from becoming independent of their approval while remaining capable of genuine care and connection. The transformed individual can love others without needing their love in return, can help others without requiring their gratitude, can lead others without seeking their approval. This independence creates the foundation for more authentic and satisfying relationships than approval seeking ever could. The practical benefits of this transformation extend into every area of life. In professional contexts, the individual who operates independently of approval-seeking pressures makes decisions based on effectiveness rather than popularity, pursues opportunities based on potential rather than consensus, and develops capabilities based on results rather than recognition. These qualities often lead to superior professional outcomes because they enable focus on actual value creation rather than on social performance. In personal relationships, the transformation creates space for genuine intimacy and mutual respect. Partners, friends, and family members find themselves relating to someone who brings his own strength to relationships rather than seeking to extract validation from them. This strength tends to be attractive and reassuring, creating healthier relationship dynamics than approval seeking typically produces. In creative and intellectual pursuits, independence from approval seeking enables authentic expression and genuine innovation. The individual can pursue truth and beauty according to his own vision rather than conforming to others' expectations or critical fashion. This freedom often leads to more distinctive and meaningful creative work. The broader implications of this philosophy suggest that societies themselves benefit when their members operate from strength rather than from approval-seeking weakness. Citizens who think independently rather than following popular opinion create more robust democratic processes. Entrepreneurs who pursue innovative opportunities rather than seeking social approval create more dynamic economies. Leaders who make decisions based on principles rather than polls provide more effective governance. Yet the transformation is not without its challenges. The process of destroying the weak self can be uncomfortable because it requires giving up familiar sources of comfort and validation. Relationships may change as others adjust to dealing with someone who no longer seeks their approval or defends against their criticism. Some people may interpret independence as rejection or hostility, requiring careful navigation of social situations. The individual undergoing this transformation must also guard against replacing approval seeking with its opposite extreme of deliberate contrarianism or hostility toward others' opinions. The goal is not to reject all external input but to receive such input without being controlled by it. The transformed individual can consider others' perspectives and feedback while making decisions based on his own judgment rather than on social pressure. The ultimate test of this transformation lies not in dramatic confrontations or obvious conflicts but in the daily moments when social pressure arises and the individual must choose between authentic action and approval-seeking behavior. These moments occur constantly, in business meetings where unpopular but correct decisions must be made, in social situations where others expect conformity to group opinion, in family interactions where others seek validation for their choices, in professional contexts where colleagues pressure for consensus. Each of these moments presents an opportunity to strengthen authentic authority or to return to approval-seeking patterns. The individual who consistently chooses authentic action gradually builds a reputation for reliability and strength that others come to respect even when they disagree with his positions. More importantly, he builds internal confidence and capability that serve as the foundation for increasingly effective action and genuine achievement. The man who completes this destruction of his weak self discovers that he has gained something far more valuable than others' approval. He has gained himself. Free from the need to conform to others' expectations, he can discover and express his authentic nature. Free from the compulsion to defend his choices, he can direct his energy toward meaningful achievement. Free from the dependency on external validation, he can find satisfaction in the quality of his efforts and the consistency of his principles. This liberation enables what Machiavelli recognized as the highest form of human achievement, the expression of individual excellence in service of meaningful goals. When a man no longer needs permission to be himself, he can develop and express capabilities that might not conform to social expectations but which serve his genuine purposes and contribute to authentic accomplishments. The historical examples that Machiavelli studied, from successful princes to effective merchants to influential artists, share this common characteristic: they operated from their own center rather than seeking approval from their environment. They made decisions based on their analysis of what would be effective rather than on what would be popular. They pursued their goals with consistency and determination regardless of social pressure or criticism. These individuals shaped their environments rather than being shaped by them. They created value and achieved results that others recognized and respected, not because they sought such recognition but because they focused on actual achievement rather than on social performance. Their influence and success emerged as natural consequences of their effectiveness rather than as goals pursued for their own sake. The modern application of these principles faces challenges that Machiavelli's subjects could hardly have imagined.
Social media creates unprecedented opportunities for approval seeking and unprecedented pressure for constant social performance.
The speed of communication means that criticism and approval arrive instantly and continuously. The global nature of modern society means that one can seek validation from ever-widening circles of strangers whose opinions have no bearing on one's actual life or goals.
Yet these modern challenges make the Machiavellian principles more relevant rather than less so.
The individual who can operate independently of social media validation, who can make decisions without seeking virtual approval, who can pursue meaningful goals without broadcasting his progress for social recognition, possesses a competitive advantage that grows more significant as approval-seeking behavior becomes more widespread and compulsive. The transformation from weak self to strong self represents perhaps the most practical and powerful form of personal development available to human beings. Unlike approaches that depend upon external circumstances or others' cooperation, this transformation lies entirely within individual control.
No one can prevent another person from ceasing to seek approval. No external force can compel someone to defend himself against criticism. No outside authority can force an individual to make his worth dependent upon social validation.
The process requires only honesty about one's current patterns, commitment to changing those patterns, and consistent practice in making decisions based on effectiveness rather than approval. The results: increased confidence, more authentic relationships, greater achievement, and essential indestructibility in the face of social pressure, justify whatever discomfort the transformation process may involve. As Machiavelli observed from his position in the political upheavals of Renaissance Italy, the difference between those who shape history and those who were shaped by it lies not in their circumstances but in their relationship to others' opinions. The prince who needed approval from his subjects could not make the difficult decisions that effective governance required.
The merchant who sought validation from competitors could not pursue the innovative strategies that business success demanded.
The individual who depended upon social recognition for his sense of worth could not develop the authentic capabilities that meaningful achievement requires. The man who destroys his weak self, who eliminates every dependency upon external validation, creates within himself the conditions necessary for genuine strength, authentic achievement, and lasting influence. He becomes indestructible not because he cannot be criticized or opposed, but because such criticism and opposition cannot reach the sources of his strength, confidence, and determination.
This destruction of weakness represents not an end but a beginning.
Free from the chains of approval-seeking, defended by the fortress of inner strength, the transformed individual can turn his attention to the positive work of creating value, achieving meaningful goals, and expressing his authentic nature.
He can focus his energy on results rather than on managing others' opinions, on achievement rather than on social performance, on genuine contribution rather than on gaining recognition.
In this focus lies the ultimate vindication of Machiavellian wisdom. The man who ceases to chase approval and to defend himself discovers that he no longer needs to do either.
Others' approval comes naturally to those who create genuine value. Defense becomes unnecessary for those whose strength is real rather than performed.
The very qualities that approval-seeking seeks to achieve, respect, influence, security, emerge spontaneously from the authentic strength that replaces the weak self's dependencies and vulnerabilities. The silent power that men fear is not the power to dominate or control others, but the power to remain uncontrolled by them. It is the terrible strength of someone who operates according to his own principles rather than according to social pressure, who pursues his own goals rather than seeking others' approval, who finds his satisfaction in authentic achievement rather than in external recognition. This power threatens those who depend upon manipulation and social control because it proves immune to their tactics and independent of their influence. Against such strength, no weapon formed from criticism, social pressure, or withdrawal of approval can prosper.
The man who has destroyed his weak self stands free from the invisible chains that bind others to the opinions and reactions of their environment.
In this freedom lies not isolation but the possibility for genuine connection, not callousness but the capacity for authentic care, not weakness but the strength that enables lasting achievement and meaningful contribution to the world. The journey from approval-seeking to authentic strength is neither easy nor quick, but it is available to anyone willing to undertake it.
It requires no special circumstances, no external permissions, no others' cooperation.
It demands only the courage to examine one's own patterns honestly and the commitment to choose effectiveness over popularity, authentic action over social performance, genuine achievement over external recognition.
For those who complete this transformation, the rewards extend far beyond personal benefit.
A world populated by individuals who operate from authentic strength rather than from approval-seeking weakness would be a world of greater innovation, more genuine relationships, more effective leadership, and more meaningful achievement. Each person who destroys his weak self contributes to this possibility while gaining for himself the indestructible foundation upon which all lasting success and satisfaction ultimately rest.